Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk about issues related to negotiating the agreed upon parenting time schedule after your divorce. So stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters, and these are resources to help you thrive. This video is a part of a sequence that I'm doing on co-parenting after divorce. So if you'd like to watch the entire playlist, starting at the beginning, including this video, I'll put the link in the description below. And after you watch this video, if you want to click that, you can go see what other topics I have covered in this series. So why am I talking to you about this? If you're new to this sequence or new to my channel, I'm a therapist. I've been in practice for 27 years. I've worked with thousands of patients in the outpatient setting and the inpatient setting. And a big part of what I have done in my career is working with separating and separated parents. And that has been in the roles of therapist, co-parent coach, mediator, expert witness, and psychoeducator and book author. So I've written 2 books on the topic. And I also have taught over 250 live workshops to several thousand divorcing parents. All right. So I've worked at this point with thousands of parents, and I've learned a lot of things about how to cope with divorce, how to parent effectively after divorce, how to deal with common divorce-related issues. So that's what leads me to offer this set of videos to you in this playlist. So in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about some things to think about when you are negotiating your parenting time schedule. Okay. Parenting time schedule is the schedule that you're going to follow in terms of when your kid is with which one of you after the separation. And so I want to talk about some common things that parents think about and should think about, in my opinion, in certain ways, in order to approach that process of negotiation in the most competent way and to point toward the most optimal schedule and workable schedule for you that also serves your kids' needs. All right. So one bit of advice that I give is, if it's possible to keep the schedule flexible and you and your ex are relatively cooperative, I think in a lot of situations it's beneficial to not finalize the schedule until later at some point. There's no magical later, but sometimes people come to the conclusion, okay, now we're going to get a divorce. Obviously, we have to figure out what the schedule is. And they're at the very front end of that process of coping with the shock and adjustments of the divorce. They haven't even maybe yet physically separated. And so or at least they haven't separated, so they have a stable lifestyle. And so at that point, what do you have to go on to figure out the schedule? Well, at that point, it's kind of speculative because you don't really yet know what your stable separated situation is in terms of work schedules maybe, and where you live, commute times between your houses, and a host of other factors that might actually ultimately influence how you maintain a workable parenting time schedule. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't think about that and start to create the framework for a post-separation schedule even before you've made the full adjustment to it. And in fact, you have to fly by the seat of your pants in the middle of it, because as you separate, as you go through this, you have to follow some sort of schedule. But in terms of that idea that, okay, now we have a finalized schedule that we're going to put in our legal petition to get the judge to sign off in the final decree, that then we will follow until we modify it later. that's a stable schedule that you want to be, as much as possible, well informed about all of the factors that come to bear on the question of what is a good schedule for us to follow. Okay. I get that for a lot of people, you're like, well, I can't cooperate in the short term. We have to follow some sort of schedule. So, yes, on the practical level, if civility is not there, if cooperation is not there for you to easily kind of flexibly follow some sort of schedule until you can finalize a formal one later, yes, you have to kind of come up with something that works. But that's one bit of advice that I give for couples who are more, on the upper 50% end of cooperative. Waiting a bit is probably a good idea because, again, some of the factors that influence the wisdom of the settled decision about the schedule are going to reveal themselves in the next few weeks or months for you, right? Now, for a lot of people, the legal process of filing the initial petition and getting the final decree is several months long. It's not uncommon for it to be years long. So typically there's some sort of interim schedule that people follow before they eventually work out whatever's going to be in the final decree. So it's usually an experiment anyway until it's some sort of settled order or agreement, right? Now, one common question that people ask me is, if we do enter into some agreement that's formal, like in the divorce decree, do we have to follow that? And again, I'm not an attorney, and so I'm not giving you legal advice. You should consult your attorney for definitive legal answers about this. But in general, if you have some formal agreement about your parenting time schedule, or if you have a decree that outlines what the schedule is, you're not breaking any laws to deviate by mutual agreement. So if the schedule says that Johnny is at Dad's house on Wednesday evenings from 7 to 9, and Dad and Mom mutually agree that that's going to change to Thursdays, nobody's going to follow up and hold you accountable to make it Wednesday, right? The order, the decree that spells out what the schedule is really a fallback when you can't agree. And so that's one way to think about what do we want in the final decree, because as I said in a previous video, the more specificity that you get with any sort of detail in the final decree, it becomes the thing around which you might have some future disagreement and litigation. So now you can't leave the schedule vague, because the states usually do want to comprehensively cover basically all the days of the year with however the schedule is described in the decree. Okay. Another common question that people ask me is, should we try to have a 50-50 schedule? Meaning that the kid is with mom 50% of the time and with dad 50% of the time. Because historically, the convention was to have someone who ends up, through whatever wrangling, being the primary parent with primary physical custody. And the other parent typically has some sort of conventional pattern of contact that's less than 50% of the time. So the most common one is every other weekend and a few hours on a weeknight. And that's the non-custodial parent's schedule. And then the kid is with the other parent the rest of the time. They've done research on this in terms of outcome studies looking at just what is the schedule, and then what do we notice about whether the kid is doing okay or not. And these studies came out like 20, 25 years ago because divorce has been around a long time. So some of these questions have actually been looked at for a long time because there's lots of data points. Lots of people get divorced. There's lots of kids whose parents got divorced. So in any case, they looked at kids whose parents had a 50-50 schedule and kids whose parents had the conventional lopsided schedule. And interestingly, what they found was that in terms of the outcome studies for the kids, like, are they doing okay in school? Are they doing okay socially? What's their level of criminality? What's their level of mental health issues, drug abuse, precocious sexuality, running away? The common things that they look at in outcome studies when they look at kids of divorce. But what they found was that there was no difference. So the kids who had the lopsided schedule and the kids whose parents followed the 50-50 schedule did not look any different. All right. So it seems like that question is from the kid's standpoint in terms of what does the kid fundamentally need to be okay. It is not the case that for the kid, you need to follow a 50-50 schedule, right? Now, I know a lot of people resist that idea because of a commitment to this idea of 50-50. And I will tell you, when parents ask me, should we follow 50-50? I actually say yes and no. Okay. And the reason I say that is from the standpoint of what your kid needs, your kid can get their needs met with something that's not 50-50. So from that standpoint, the answer is no, you really don't have to. But I think there are valid reasons to try to have 50-50. And one of them is just that in terms of, me versus my daughter's mom, we may want to have a sense that the schedule is fair. And the one issue is if you're the parent who has the majority of the time, there's a 100% chance that some of the time you will think that's not fair. Now, I know that may sound weird to you if you're someone like, I want to win, I want to get 100% of the time, and I want to get my kid's other parent out of their life. The reality is it's a burden. If you're parenting one or more children and you don't have the support, the instrumental support of parenting of the other parent, that is burdensome. And so one argument for trying to steer toward 50-50, even if it's not a pure 50-50, is that parents often feel like, well, it's more fair to me that I'm not unduly burdened with the majority of the time, which from one respect may seem like a win, but is going to be burdensome, right? So I think from the parent's standpoint that it's reasonable to not necessarily do precisely 50-50, but to try to have a fair schedule so that you both are meaningfully involved in your kid's life, but also meaningfully supportive of the other parent in terms of their parenting burden. So that's the yes part. Another thing about parenting time schedule is that people use this as a way to battle. And I would have to say that in my career, if you ask me what's the number one thing that people battle about after separation, it would be the parenting time schedule. I do think a lot of those battles are emotional, and I think they're based on the shock and the hurt of the divorce or whatever preceded the divorce. And I don't think that it's invalid to try to, argue for one schedule or another based on factors like, is the other parent fit? Are they safe? I think that, we do consider those. But the thing is, I see a lot of emotional battles where, like, I want to win the majority of the time because it proves that I'm the better parent, or I want to win the majority of the time because it's one way I can get over on you, or I want to have most or all the time because I want to interfere with your relationship with our child. Those are emotional reasons. They don't necessarily lead to wise outcomes in terms of the schedule. So, there's no easy fix for that, but I think you have a responsibility to yourself and your kid to sort out those emotional issues so that you're focused on the wise, rational factors that really do need to be considered when you're crafting the schedule and not only acting out of an emotional place. And, what's the best way to deal with that is to see a therapist. get good social support, and see a competent therapist to help you sort out how you are coping with your divorce so that to the extent possible, you filter out some of what potentially could be unwise contribution of your emotional reactions to the divorce, or that you're getting embattled over something in a way that doesn't serve you or your child or your other parent, right? So if you only approach decisions and agreements after divorce from the principle of I want to hurt the other parent as much as possible, you are going to make unwise decisions. That's the way it works, right? If I only want to approach the question of what is a good parenting time schedule based on how can I hurt the other parent as much as possible, I'm not thinking of my kids' needs. I may not even be thinking of my own needs, and I'm only thinking about how can I do damage to the other person. And that's going to lead to unwise decisions about any particular issue, including the parenting time schedule. So that's something that you do need to take an honest look at to the extent that you can. And usually that's aided by good social support and therapy. Okay. So there is no perfect parenting time schedule. Let me say that. It's not 50-50, although for the reasons I said earlier, I think that it may be 50-50 for a lot of people, mostly because it helps you share the burden of parenting after separation. But there's not a perfect schedule. The other thing I'd say about crafting the schedule is that you really need to see the first calendar year after your separation, wherever it happens in the year. But the first 12 months after your separation is an experiment, because you separate and you don't have the experience of being separated in your current situation and co-parenting after the separation. And you're going to learn a lot, including some things about the parenting time schedule and about parenting as separated parents. You're going to learn a lot in the first year. So hold on loosely, but firmly to the schedule in the first year, because probably in year 2, you're going to make some revisions to the schedule based on what you discovered in year 1, right? So a lot of times, like I'm making this video coming close to Thanksgiving, a lot of parents are separating and thinking, how are we going to deal with the holidays? How do we deal with birthdays? How do we deal with maybe regular family traditions that have gone on in the family prior to separation? You're not going to wake up the day after you decide to divorce knowing all of the workable answers for how to deal with the parenting time schedule in regard to holidays, birthdays, and things like that, summer vacations. You're going to learn a lot about that in the next year. Now, will you have to come up with some way to muddle through in the next year to have a schedule? Yes. But again, unburden yourself for the task of having to come up with the wisest, most durable schedule today, when this may be a new and dynamic and evolving situation from which you're going to learn a lot over the next year, right? So there's no perfect way to do it. Usually for most parents in the first year, some people just, luck out and kind of land on a good workable way to get through the first 12 months. And that ends up looking a lot like the schedule that they adopt and stick with thereafter. But, a lot of people have some confusion about, do we do 2 separate Christmases, or do we try to do Christmas together this year and then maybe do it different next year? And there are lots of factors that go into that. I think that if you're a parent and you and the other parent are struggling with questions like that, you can get good advice from a therapist who's got some experience with divorce. So this is one of the types of things that parents work with me around. You're welcome to contact me. My website link is in the description below, and there's a contact button if you might want to get some advice about your particular situation, about this issue or other types of separation and co-parenting issues after divorce. That's another way to get some good support for you and your ex to work through and negotiate some of these issues, which are arguably, they're confusing, right? So hopefully this is helpful. If you like this video, hit the like button below. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, please subscribe. And I welcome comments, as long as you don't use comments on this video to flame your ex. And if you really like the video, share it with a friend or post it on your social media. That helps me to have a wider audience for the channel. And stay tuned with this playlist because I will keep posting videos on this topic in this sequence in this playlist. Thanks.